All right. Hello, everybody. This is Matt coming at you from the Pure Intentions Coffee Warehouse. If you don't know what you're watching, this is part of the No Filter Coffee Fest virtual presentations this week. So because of all of the things that have been going on, the No Filter Coffee Fest was pivoting to do some online presentations. So if you haven't tuned in, there's still another day worth of presentations tomorrow. So we're going to spend the next half an hour talking about one particular farm and one particular community that we work with pretty heavily in Chirinos, Peru. About halfway through this presentation, we're going to be joined by our importer partner, Hacienda La Manita, and they're going to be discussing some of the impacts that Chirinos has seen due to the COVID-19 health crisis. Before that, we're going to try something a little bit different. So if those of you out there watching right now can bear with us, I'm actually going to be taking this live stream over to our projector in the classroom and showing a video that the folks at Finca Churupampa had put together for us, and we made subtitles, and I'm going to be reading the subtitles out to the folks that are watching this live stream. So it's a little bit of a behind the scenes, discussing some of the social programs and things that they do to try and make some of the producer partners that they work with to help their cost of livings get reduced and to help their overall quality of life go up. And isn't that what we all want? So I'm really excited to be doing this. Thank you to Diana and thank you to Oatly. You know, it's just a great opportunity for us as a coffee community to be sharing information. If anybody has tuned into the other live streams, there's been some great brewing demos. There's also just been some awesome conversations about what it means to be a community partner. So we're really excited to be adding this as our own little addition to the live stream series here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started just with a little bit of background and a description on why we work with Finca Churupampa, where we've come in this growth process of finding producers to work with, and what it means to us to find someone that we can truly appreciate the partnership with. So, you know, I'm going to take us back, you know, I'd say probably about 5 years or so ago. You know, as a wholesale coffee roaster, green coffee is our number one ingredient, right? So we search far and wide for all of the different quality levels that we need to be able to bring you guys the amazing coffees that you love in your homes and in your cafes and restaurants every day. And as you know, as recently as about 5 years ago, we really didn't have that robust of a program around finding partners, finding producer partners that we were thoroughly invested in. We were just kind of buying based on a quality metric without really going down to that really deep level of relationship building. And that kind of changed when we started our discussions with Hacienda La Manita, and they had actually, at the beginning of our relationship, they had been working with Finca Churupampa relatively freshly, and thought it was a really good partnership for them to start developing. So they introduced us to their coffee and just realistically the story. I mean, we hadn't met any of the producers yet. We hadn't been to Origin to visit their farm, but the story of what they were doing and in support of their community in Chirinos really drew us in, and the quality of the coffee backed it up. It's easy to get swept up into a story, but if the quality of the coffee is not there, then it's a one-sided conversation. So we were really impressed with the coffees that we were getting out of Chirinos from this particular farmer group. And the stories, as I mentioned, were just great. They, as a kind of an umbrella group, they developed a lot of social programs to help the producer partners that sold them their coffee, realistically how to lower their cost of producing coffee. So instead of going out and buying fertilizer, commercially, is there a way that we can create fertilizer with our own organic materials that we have on our farm? And that's something that you're going to see Eber describe pretty significantly in the video that we're going to show here shortly. So that, just right off the bat, the story about how they helped other producer partners in their own region increase the level of quality of their coffee and increase their ability to live at a higher, living standard by lowering the cost of production. It just really drew us in, and it resonated with the people that we were turning around and selling that Peruvian coffee to. People were really drawn in by that. It gave them something to attach to. It gave them something to think about when they were drinking that cup of coffee. It wasn't just a brown liquid in a cup. It was a story, and they could trace it in their minds all the way back to helping someone else in a faraway country by them supporting this farm through the purchase of our coffee. So it was really elongating that supply chain, and from that kind of initial spark, we started driving down into a little bit more detail, and had the luck to last September go and visit the farm with our partner at Hacienda La Manita, Katie, and we stayed on the farm for a few evenings and did a tour and saw how they create their own compost and their own fertilizer, and they build their own trout ponds and raise their own small animals and have their own vegetable garden. So it's pretty much a self-contained environment that they're able to then take that model and teach it to all the different producer partners in the area, so that not only are they able to learn how to produce higher quality coffee, but they're also able to learn how to live more self-sufficiently without having to go out and buy things from a store just in order to survive. So that was really, really impactful to us, both personally and as a company. And it really felt like the support that we were able to provide through the buying of their coffee was going to more than just, we're not just giving money to a company, we're giving money to a number of families that are actually using it to survive and to feed their own families. And on that trip, we got to meet a number of the producers that sold coffee to Finca Churupampa. We got to meet actually 3 of them in a single day. And the stories that they told about, even there was one gentleman, Walter, who he was reticent in the beginning to even join the group. He didn't, he said, okay, well, what's the difference? I'm able to grow my own coffee, and who cares? As soon as he tasted the difference between his coffee alongside Finca Churupampa's coffee, he said, okay, how do I get my coffee to taste like this? And all of those reservations were gone, and he was a part of that membership group. And since then, we've actually bought some of his micro lot coffees, and some of his coffee ends up in the regional blend that we get from Finca Churupampa that many of you may know as our Peru single origin farm select. So the stories they just really abounded while we were there, and it was such an impactful trip for us that we came back and immediately wanted to know what we could do to help spread the message of all the great things that they're doing. So this platform here, the No Filter Coffee Fest, and just the ability to share the story, it's really the best thing that we can think of to share what's going on, not only from the social and farm program perspective that I was mentioning earlier, but Katie's going to be able to tell you a little bit about what their impacts have been from the COVID-19 crisis, and how, as a coffee community that's relied on a lot of external resources, how they've tried to take that back and say, okay, how can we as a community get through this together and still push through and persevere. So with that, bear with me. I'm going to take this camera setup, and I'm going to take it over to our projector and get the video started. So give me 30 seconds, and apologies for the little bit of wobbly stuff that we're going to have going on as I go get this set up. Other way. There we go. All right. And so I'm going to start playing this video. There are subtitles, but just in case they go too quickly and they might be difficult to read, I'm actually going to be reading out the subtitles that are appearing on this video as well. So the gentleman that's going to be talking is Eber. He's a quality control and a farm operator on the Finca Churupampa farm itself. So you'll get to see a lot of the programs that they're implementing here that they are able to teach to the other producers. Here we are at the 2020 harvest. This is a Bourbon varietal planted 2 years ago. It looks like the harvest is going to be pretty good this year. We're still working to fertilize carefully so these plants produce a really nice cup. We have our own compost operation here on the farm. This allows us to reuse organic materials from the area. This is coffee cherry pulp and kitchen scraps. Up above, there's animal waste from the farm. We also add vegetation we cut back and banana stalks to add potassium to the compost. We also add microorganisms in a compost tea that we make here that speeds up the decomposition. It takes about 20 to 30 days for all of this to decompose. Preparing organic compost ourselves is very easy to do and saves a lot of money. The most important thing here is to mix the components well and turn it often. We recently started this small project to produce churufer. It is composed of our organic compost plus fish meal for nutrients, then we pelletize it. This makes a slow-release fertilizer that is about 12% potassium, 11% phosphorus, and 12% nitrogen. The coffee plants love it, and it's less expensive for the producers to use, which lowers their costs. We're teaching our producer members to produce their own food on the farms. This includes things like raising small animals and creating successful vegetable farms on their land. The good thing here is that food can be consumed by the family or actually sold for extra income if there's extra. This is another way to lower the costs on the coffee farm. We want to have more income sources for the farm, not just the coffee itself. We show members how to produce as much of their food as possible on their own farms. This includes not just the animals, but fruits like limes and oranges. This also lowers their cost of living and is healthier as well. After depulping and fermentation, the coffee comes to these drying beds. After the wet coffee drips dry, we move it off the open air beds. The coffee is moved to the covered bed area to finish drying. This process can also take between 20 and 30 days. We find that slow, even drying improves the shelf life of the green coffee. We want to preserve all of the hard work from growing great varietals and fertilizing carefully. Drying with these beds is the last step to quality. All right, now we're going to come back. Cool. What did everybody think about that? Pretty interesting stuff that they got going on there. Oh, hold on one second. We got another video playing. So as you might have been able to tell, that was on YouTube, so it automatically played the next video. So if you're interested in seeing that again, you can search for our Pure Intentions Coffee channel on YouTube. There's actually also a couple of brewing demos out there, but all of that is available for public use on our Pure Intentions YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. So let's see, we're at 12:15, so that means I'm going to bring in Katie from Hacienda La Manita to talk about some of the COVID-19 impacts that she's seen coming out of Chirinos. So give me 1 second to add her in here. Katie, that invite should be coming your way.
All right. Am I on?
We can hear you. There you go.
Great. I'm having some serious chair envy right now.
This is my old man chair.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Katie was kind enough to orchestrate that video that we just saw. And thanks to Aber and the Finca Churupampa team for putting that together for us on relatively short notice. I hope that I didn't butcher your words too much in my translation attempt. So Katie was the first person that introduced us to the folks in Chirinos. And we've been working with her over the last, I don't know, it's probably been three or 4 years now.
Yeah.
And she led our team down there on that trip that we took to the farm itself. So we thought it would be really great for her to come on and share a little bit about her history with the folks on that farm, and also just, you know, what they're experiencing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, if we had more time, I think we could bring everybody in and, you know, show the crew down in Peru too. But I know they logged on and they're watching. So if people have questions.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Hola, mis amigos.
We can type them some questions. So I've been working with the Finca Churupampa guys for about 10 years now, and have known them for, you know, for around that time, and have seen them grow and change throughout time. In 2011, Eber, who was in the video, and his 3 brothers took over their family farm from their father and decided to change the model, to do organic farming, to do micro lots, to do something different. And in those 9 years, they've really accomplished a lot. So I wanted to just talk, you know, briefly about what's Peru like, and you know, a little bit about what the coronavirus has been like there. So Peru itself is a very large country, and it has the Andes Mountains that run down the middle of it and divide it up into regions. So on one side you have the Amazon basin, and on the other side you have the Pacific Ocean. And the fact that there's a huge mountain range running down the country means that there are a lot of very hard to reach areas. And a lot of those are your coffee farming regions. So because coronavirus has actually been pretty bad, they've had a pretty bad outbreak in Lima, the government decided to protect these rural communities that they would do a government enforced quarantine. And they started this on March 16th. So pretty, you know, it's been 2 months at this point. They said, you cannot move from wherever you are, like no moving around the country. You have to get special permission if you're going to leave Lima and go somewhere else. They also enforce curfew hours. So, hey, you can't leave your house after 7 p.m. And the goal of that was to protect the rural areas, really, because healthcare is not great there. So the best approach to preventing coronavirus was to just keep it out of these communities to begin with. So here we see these things in Peru that they're calling rondas campesinas, which is like rural community patrols. And in Peru, there's a very tight sense of community. A lot of it is because these places are rural. And, you know, think about your small farming communities in the US or wherever. So the rondas campesinas are known community members who have taken it upon themselves to patrol outsiders coming into the communities. So in the case of Finca Churupampa, their town is called Chirinos, where they have their office and warehouse. And the patrols have stationed themselves at the entrances to the town, the 2 roads that come into Chirinos, and they stop every single car and they look and see, hey, oh, do you live here? Hey, we know you, you're a resident. If you're not, and you're not delivering food or something essential, they don't even let them in the town. So, you know, imagine something like that in the US, where you position yourself at the freeway and stop every car. So that's one thing that's happening that's pretty interesting in Peru. Another effect of the coronavirus is that as the harvest is just starting now, usually they have pickers come in from other regions in Peru, just migratory labor that'll come pick during the harvest and then move back to where they're from. But that's not allowed, right? They're not gonna, those local patrols are not letting any outsiders in. So What they're doing are more community picking. So using neighbors to pick their own farms. So most of the coffee farms in Peru are quite small, like maybe maximum 5 acres. And normally they would be picked by family members and by a few hired laborers at the peak of the harvest. So now what they're doing is taking neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods are saying, hey, okay, we're going to pick this farmer's farm today. We're going to pick all the ripe cherries. And then tomorrow we're going to go next door and pick all the ripe cherries and work as a group. So, you know, it's kind of like the whole self-sufficiency motto of Finca Churupampa, right? It's like, let's do things on our own. So get together as a group and help each other out. One other thing that's pretty interesting is that there are very few domestic flights right now. Finca Churupampa is about a 2-hour flight from Lima. So they're up pretty close to the border with Ecuador. And the coffee trade really moves on samples. So before we ship a container load of coffee, we have to get a sample that represents each lot in that coffee, and we cup it at our cupping lab here in the US and approve it and send it to Matt for you to approve it too. Because they can't send any of these samples via Air Express, we're having to, I think it's really kind of showing the power of our strong relationship with Finca Churupampa, because at least with a couple of these, until flights get going again, we're allowing them to cup and approve some pre-shipment samples for us on the ground and then ship without moving that sample. So,
and that's been something I've heard of industry-wide as well.
Yeah.
It's been a big challenge.
It hasn't just been Peru. We've had that with Colombia too, and a few other places.
So, you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is if you can just give us your impression of, you know, the coffees that are coming out of Chirinos and the experimentation that Finca Churupampa is doing with some of their producers. You know, over the course of your relationship with them, you alluded to the quality that you've seen, you know, the vast increase in quality that you've seen. What are some things, just since we have a lot of coffee enthusiasts, excuse me, on the live stream here, what are some things that you think that they've been able to do to help turn that program around really quickly?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest quality pinch points with Peruvian coffee is the drying stage specifically. And I think part of that is just culture. Like the traditional way to dry coffee in Peru is on a tarp out in front of your house by the road, where it's getting dust and chickens walking on it, and it rains and you're not next to it, and it gets wet again. So one thing that the really big quality pusher that Churupampa is doing right now is covered raised drying beds. So one, get your coffee up off the ground where it's dirty, and two, put it under cover so it does not get wet if it rains during the afternoon during the coffee harvest. And it also keeps it warm at night, so it prolongs the drying period. So you get not as strong of a drying at night, but you're still having warmth around the coffee. And they can also kind of open up the sides of these covered drying areas to let air flow through and adjust that. So one thing that they told us when we were visiting is that they're starting to look at drying curves. So like you would look at a roasting curve, you know, to optimize your coffee, they're looking at, well, what's the best drying speed and temperature to make the best flavors out of these coffees.
I think that was one of the things that Senor Walter did pretty much from one harvest to the next. They helped him build that covered raised bed that we visited, and that increased his cup score by, you know, 6 or 7 points just from changing the way that he was drying his coffee and putting it under a covered bed. So that, you know, it's funny to think of as a coffee professional, you know, these things seem to be ubiquitous, you know, oh, why wouldn't you do that? But there are some communities that haven't really been exposed or taught the right way to do things, or they may not have the chance to cup their own coffee or understand where the quality differentiators are. So, You know, that's one of the things that I really respected about Churupampa is their willingness, because they are a farm too. So, you know, they're able to experiment with these things themselves and then take their teachings and share them with their producer partners. So,
yep. And they invite every member
else?
to come and cup their own coffees in their cupping lab too, which is really cool. So, you know, there's not just an expert saying, hey, your coffee is good, your coffee is bad, we're going to pay you this for it. Like, hey, come and taste it and learn why it's good or bad. So we could do their cupping lab tour maybe in another video.
Well, hopefully we're not losing Katie. Looks like on my end anyway, she's breaking up a little bit. I guess before we jump into the Q&A, the one thing that I wanted to just really reflect on here was when we were down with Katie in Peru, everyone treated us like family, even though we had just met them. Every single farm that we went to, the first thing that we did was sat down at their family table and had a meal, which really, you know, my gut was feeling it after the fourth farm that we went to, and we had the fourth full meal within a 4-hour time frame. But the focus on community and the willingness to be open to realistically strangers, and bring them into their home and show them their farm, it blew my mind. And I will never see that country and that coffee producing way in any different manner than that. So I do want to just leave a couple of minutes at the end. Do we have any questions? I believe, Katie, you said, I can't see who's on right now, but I think you said the folks from Finca are on right now. So if anybody has any questions for them, Katie will be acting as translator, because it would probably take me about 20 minutes to translate back and forth.
Yeah. Yep.
So if anybody has any questions out there, feel free to just type it into the chat window at the bottom in the comment section. And we will try and do our best to get that over. This is kind of a flying by the seat of our pants operation right now. So we'll have to see technologically how that works out. But so the other thing I wanted to mention too is we were lucky enough to acquire 3 micro lots from the 3 farms that we visited while we were there with Hébert. And those are going to be available at Canopy. There's a new hotel going down in South Park called Canopy Charlotte. Will have a full-scale coffee bar in there, and 2 of the micro lots will be available there. And the 3rd micro lot will be available in a new coffee shop, 77 Grounds in Davidson, that's going in. So keep your eye open for those. And if you're interested in tasting some of the coffees from the producers that we met while we were down there, then please feel free to go taste it at those locations. So we've had a couple of questions. What our favorite coffee is? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the day and how warm it is and what mood I'm in. I mean, it's kind of like what's your favorite music? It all just kind of depends. Katie, do you have a favorite coffee from Peru?
I love the coffee from Neptali Santos, who is that's one of the micro lots that you got. He is the sweetest guy. Probably a lot of it is that he's a really nice guy, and so is his wife and his son, who is 11-year-old son. When we visited his farm, he wanted to show us, hey, I have 100 chickens that I'm raising. Yeah. He dragged us up to see the chickens. But his coffee is so sweet, really chocolatey and spicy, clove and cinnamon. Just a delicious coffee.
And he was actually experimenting with natural processed coffees. So we haven't seen a lot of natural processed coffees coming out of Peru. Most of them have been washed. But Neptali was working with Finca Churupampa to experiment with natural processed coffees, which is where the coffee is dried in the husk. So that'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. So Diana asked if we could define what a micro lot is. Katie, since you're the importer expert here, would you like to take that one?
There's no definition, really. A standard container load of coffee holds about 250 to 280 of the big burlap coffee bags. So most places say a micro lot. Obviously, it has to be less than a full container load. It's usually one producer or one community's coffee that's grouped together, traceable, high quality. So yeah, so size-wise, I mean, it could be a bag, it could be 30 bags.
Yeah. So from a roaster perspective, when I see micro lot on an offering list, I expect it to be less than 40 bags. Otherwise, you know, it's like, that, is that really that micro? So, you know, or I would say, you know, 40 bags or less, but to Katie's point, you know, a single bag would be a micro lot as well. Another question, are there any new, I know somebody earlier asked if everybody has stayed well. And I believe that, Katie, we were talking earlier that everyone in Chirinos, there have not been any cases of coronavirus because of the extreme measures that they've taken. So let's all, you know, keep our thoughts going that direction, that it stays that way. Are there any new initiatives that they're working on? I know the pelletized fertilizer is something that they're working very diligently on that we saw in the video. Is there anything else that you can tell us about, or Iber, if you want to jump in, stuff they're working on?
Yeah. The other thing they're working on selling that compost tea, which is they're making out of, they use the coffee honey that comes from processing. So when you depulp the coffee, there's kind of a slimy layer underneath the skin of the fruit. And they collect that as the coffee ferments and use that to create this compost tea. So it's basically, that's the sugar that feeds the microorganisms. And then that actually, that's what that liquid was that he was pouring on the decomposing coffee pulp. And that helps break down the compost even faster. So the microorganisms, you know, eat away at all the organic material.
Right.
And it like reduces the time it takes by half. So it's pretty amazing. They're working on producing that en masse and bottling it and selling it to their members for a, you know, a small price.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we discussed when we were on their farm was the fact that prior to this initiative, most of the fertilizers were massive agrochemicals that may have worked for a season or two, but over the course of the lifetime of a farm, they actually did more harm to the soil components than they did good. So they, you know, the reason that they started this program was not only to be self-sufficient, but also try and increase the longevity of the farm plots that they were working on, so they weren't destroying the very, you know, farming land that they depended on year after year. So it's, you know, it's healthier. It's based on the organic materials that they have on their own farm. So Diana also asked if we could explain the difference between natural and washed coffees. So this is after harvest, the coffee cherries come off the tree, almost looking kind of like a cranberry. And there are 2 seeds within each fruit. And what we actually end up grinding and drinking as coffee is the roasted seed of that fruit. So in order for us as a roaster to be able to get those seeds and roast them, they have to be extracted from the fruit in some way, shape, or form. Way back in the day when coffee was, you know, first coming around in Ethiopia, really the only way of getting those seeds out of the fruit was by putting them on a drying patio in the fruit and letting the natural sunlight and natural fermentation processes break down the pectin layer between the seed and the outer layer of the fruit. So just letting the, you know, as soon as you harvest the cherry off the tree, you place it in an open area that'll get a lot of sunlight and turn them regularly. And, you know, natural fermentation will break down that pectin layer. If anybody has ever had a coffee that tasted very strongly of blueberry or dark fruit or strawberry, those were most likely natural processed coffees, not exclusively, but those are the big earmarks of a natural processed coffee, most likely due to the fact that the pectin layer is exposed to the seed itself for much longer as the fermentation is still occurring. So you're getting a lot more of those sugars that are transferring into the seed itself. Washed coffee, on the other hand, is usually performed in areas that are very water rich. So you won't see these in arid coffee climates so much as Colombia, you know, is one of the foremost producers of washed coffee. There's a lot of Peruvian coffees that are washed. And what they actually do is use a machine that extracts the seeds directly after harvest. It extracts the seeds from the fruit, leaving only, as Katie was talking about a minute ago, leaving that kind of layer around the seed of pectin, because you can't really get it all off with a machine. So after they extract the seeds, they put the seeds themselves into a large water bath. and the water bath creates this nice, consistent medium for natural fermentation to occur and break down the remaining pectin layer that's on the outside of the seed. So that washed process, generally speaking, creates more of a clean, crisper flavor profile that a lot of people associate with citrus, because of that, the evenness of the fermentation that happens in the water medium versus having all of that pectin with all of those sugars contained within the entire fruit, as we were talking about in the natural processed. So I apologize if there's been questions being asked. They're kind of like rolling through. I just noticed the difference in time frame between washed and natural. And that, honestly, that's up to the farmer. There's been some folks, and Katie, please jump in here. You have a lot more experience with this from a farm level. So I'll actually toss this over to you if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So on the first part of the processing, when you ferment the coffee, it'll sit for 24 hours or so. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're doing natural coffees, usually what they do is put them through a washing channel to float off any cherries that rise up to the top. And those are going to be, your bad cherries that you don't want in your lot. So separate those out. The good, dense coffee bean cherries sink to the bottom of the washing channel. That's what will go to be your natural coffees. The importance with both of them is drying. So we were talking about the raised drying beds. With the natural, it's very similar. You have to control the airflow and the time. It's kind of like if you took a bunch of grapes, right? You could leave grapes out on your counter and they can become moldy grapes, or you can leave them out in the sun in a nice breezy area and they become raisins. So That's kind of the difference with natural coffee, is that you really want to make sure that it's dried slowly and evenly. In that way, like, they can actually take about the same amount of time. At Finca Churupampa, they're promoting a slower, prolonged, more gentle drying process on their washed coffees because they think it enhances the longevity of the green coffee, so it stays fresh longer. And so they're doing a really slow drying. You can also dry your washed coffees for a week. Natural coffees, that's going to be too fast. So generally, in most coffee places, it takes longer to do a natural processed coffee than a washed.
Yep. So another question that we just got that has some relevant information from our trip as well. Are they facing any other challenges besides COVID, like fungus or land management? And there's two things that immediately jump to mind as we think about the trip that we took last September. I forget what term they used to describe it, but it was kind of the slash and burn, where, you remember, we were driving up the hillside and they had just literally burned the entire side of a mountain trying to clear all the underbrush and grow coffee, because that's, one way for them to make money. The problem is that it creates a massive erosion problem and landslide issue, and it's very bad for the land itself. It just happens to be incredibly easy to burn the entire side of a hill or a mountain instead of having to go through and do it, by hard work or hard labor. So that was something, we drove past a number of landslides and erosion management issues because people just didn't really seem to understand the overall or long-term impact that slash and burn style farming would have. And that's something that Finca Churupampa really, Eber was, as we were driving and seeing instances of that, you could tell that it was visually disturbing for him to see the countryside that he lived in being treated in that way. The other thing related to fungus, do you remember when we were in the Amazonas? I forget, I think it was El Naranjal, Finca El Naranjal.
Yeah.
And they had the rooster's eye. So it was a fungus that I had never seen before, and they were just experiencing for the first time. So this was away from Finca Churupampa, down the road quite a ways, and a very bumpy road.
A long, treacherous road.
But we saw this for them, it was brand new, and it was even new to me. It was called Rooster's Eye, and it was starting to appear more and more on there. I believe those were Typica plants that they were farming.
Those were Catimor, actually.
Oh, Catimor. Okay.
which they had planted in response to the coffee leaf rust of 8 years ago. And now they're finding these plants that they thought were resistant are actually susceptible to ojo de gallo, this Brewster's eye fungus, which I've seen more in Central America. I haven't seen it as much in Peru.
Yeah. So they definitely are battling every day. You know, it is not easy work. It's crazy to see what these individuals go through in order to create this thing that a lot of us in consuming countries can take for granted so easily. Every tiny coffee bean that we put into our grinders every day had to be harvested by someone, had to be processed by someone, dried by somebody, carried on the back of a donkey, most likely up the hill, and loaded on a truck and carted all the way down to, you know, the nearest large city and taken to a port, put on a boat. I mean, it is not easy. So if you think about the tiny amount of money that we pay, 99-cent cup of coffee, or, you know, $8.99 bag of coffee at the grocery store, you know, it really just boggles your mind when you think about all of the work that went into every single one of those coffee beans that's in that bag. And how could it possibly be that inexpensive? So that's one of the things that we really appreciate about Churupampa is they have, you know, a wide range of coffees and across a wide spectrum of price levels, and you can pay more for your coffee if you'd like, and that ends up supporting the social programs that they put back into the community. But they also have, you know, regional blends that they put out that are consistent year over year, and we all would enjoy as our standard daily brew. So I know we've got a couple other questions coming in here. They are scrolling by very quickly. Let's see. I think we actually answered them all. Does anybody have any additional questions, or did anybody ask a question that we missed? I think we got all of them. If you're just joining us, we are talking with Katie from Hacienda La Manita about our relationship with Finca Churupampa in Chorinos, Peru. This has been a presentation as part of the No Filter Coffee Fest that has gone virtual this year. So I believe we're the last one today, but tune in tomorrow for additional live feeds. And thanks one more time to Oatly. They were a major sponsor of the virtual No Filter Coffee Fest this year. Oh yeah, can we hear more about Hacienda La Manita's role? Great.
Sure.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I'll just briefly. We are the importer in this case. So La Manita actually started as a coffee farm in Costa Rica. So we started on the producing side and grew to export coffee from our farm in Costa Rica and then import it on the other side. So we have our main importing offices in Vermont. And I'm actually in Portland, Oregon, a remote employee handling the West Coast, but have been working with our friends in Peru for a long time through coffee and even cacao a little bit. But yeah, we're basically the importer for Pure Intentions and do whatever we can to help out Matt.
Yeah. And there was another question if the farmers got to drink their own coffee. So Katie, I think you actually mentioned this a minute ago, but Finca Churupampa has an office in Chorinos that has a full-scale cupping lab in it. And that's one of the differences with their relationship with the producers is they actually invite them in to taste the coffees that they're sampling and cup with them so they can see the difference that all of their efforts are making instead of just being this kind of big brother-esque, you know, corporate overlord saying you need to do this, this, and this because it's going to increase profits. They actually are working with the individual farmers to say, hey, you know, if you change your drying process or if we can add this covered bed or, you know, try this fertilizer that we're working with, or let's start composting instead of using agrochemicals, they can actually taste the difference in the cup. The other cool thing is
Roaster.
Yeah. We're going to be roasting these microlots and sending them back. So the coffee that they're sending to us, we're going to be roasting and hopefully getting back into Walter and Neptali and Senor Garro's hands. So yeah, that's, you know, the onus is on the roaster to get the coffee back to them. So if we have any roasters out there, send your producers their coffee back so they can taste what you're doing with it. I think that was, let's see. Yep, that was the last question so far. All right, well, thank you very much to Katie. I hope that everybody from Finca Churupampa that was able to join, gracias para estar aquí. Thank you for being here to the Finca folks. And if there's any questions, this is going to be available. This live feed will be available to rewatch. Check out No Filter Coffee Fest. And also that video that we watched, if you missed it, there was a 5-minute video from the farm itself that is available again on YouTube. Just look for our Pure Intentions Coffee channel. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely weekend. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Matt.